Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. This will be my room only for 2 more videos. Today's video or tomorrow's video, because after that I'll be moving places. And next time you see me, unless I'm releasing a video that I released previously, because I have done a bit of that, you'll probably be seeing me in some different locations, keeping this secret. But I'll still be there with you. Don't worry, I'm not going to give up on you. So in this video, I'm just going to return to a question that one of my Patreon supporters, Michelle, raised through a link that he shared with me about INTJs being the most misunderstood type, or not considered to be, but actually really is really being the most misunderstood type, which raises the question, is INFJ the most misunderstood type? If it's not, which type is the most misunderstood, in my opinion? And what are the factors at play here? And hopefully, some of the answers that I provide won't be too obvious, and I'll be able to bring a fresh perspective. So before I move on, just remember, I speak a lot about INFJs, and I have written a book on INFJs. Been out 2 years now. If you haven't got a hold of it, get it. A lot of the deep stuff that is to be known about INFJs is in this book. All the links below, less than $10, available on Amazon. And if you're interested in INFJ exploration from a fictional viewpoint, but also existentialism, postmodernism, tortured souls, lots of stuff that happens, this is my new novel, The Infinite Castle, which you can also get, very nice product, for less than $10 at the links below. All that supports me, supports the channel, is really helpful, and hopefully it can also be really good reading for you. Don't forget that you can support me on Patreon. The link is below. That also massively helped me. And stay tuned, because there's going to be probably some more options and advantages to being a Patreon supporter, including possibly the possibility of being typed by me in a kind of session. So at least from the point of view of your INFJ-ness. So that's something I'm considering at the moment, but still cogitating it. Anyway, returning to the main topic of this video. We always return to this question. It's a question that we love kind of discussing, isn't it? The question of whether INFJs are the most misunderstood type. This is something that, about which my position has evolved over time. If you like, 6 months into identifying as an INFJ, I probably would have been very tempted to agree, either strongly agree or moderately agree, that INFJ is the most misunderstood type, or one of the most misunderstood types. This comes also from a real sense that a lot of people who are INFJ feel misunderstood in the world. In the objective world. I'm not talking about the deep world of the archetypes. You remember, if you checked my last video on apophenia and patternicity, I talked about this distinction between the external world and the deep world of the archetypes, which is the world that NI plugs into, whereas the external world is the world that SE plugs into, if you like. And the functions of judgment generate judgments in relation to both worlds. Now, that's a very real feeling. It's part of the phenomenology of the INFJ to feel misunderstood. Now, the thing is, there's a couple points that need to be made here. Like, one of the first points that needs to be made is that just because you're not INFJ doesn't mean that you're not going to feel misunderstood. And there is, in principle, potentially lots of types that are going to, experience the feeling of being misunderstood just as much. If you consider INFPs, for instance. Consider INTPs, for instance. Consider, indeed, INTJs. Probably more so introverts, because by definition, if you're an introvert, well, you don't engage the world primarily through being outgoing. You don't reach out into the world. You let the world reach into you, which in a way increases the possibility that you feel misunderstood, because you're not imposing your imprint on the world to begin with. Because if that's your extroverted manner of relating, well, then in a sense, you're going to feel more understood, since you're the one who's doing the shaping. So like the more withdrawn nature of introverted types, obviously, logically leads them to an increased possibility of feeling misunderstood. If you then distinguish between, obviously sensing types and intuitive types, P types and J types, probably like the SJ introverts, for instance, are less likely to feel misunderstood, not because they're incapable of feeling this way, but probably because in the hierarchy of experiences of being in the world, this is not going to be a dominant one. Maybe the dominant one is going to be, how to organize an orderly life, how to be a provider, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's obviously potentially a lot more than that, but I just think that in the hierarchy of experiences, the feeling of being misunderstood is not going to be number one. Because the thing that we have to realize is that like the question is a type, the most misunderstood type. What is really, really interesting about this question is that the objectivity of the answer depends on the subjective experience of the users. The objectivity of the answer depends on the subjective experience of the users. In other words, if out of 100 INFJs, 90 experience regularly the feeling of being misunderstood, well, it's a subjective experience, but that is objectively the case. It's objectively true that they subjectively feel misunderstood, and that's enough to decide that they're highly misunderstood types. Because being misunderstood is a feeling, it's a subjective experience, right? Primarily. But that actually can be objectively the case that it is a subjective experience. So it's really going to be down to how many INFJs out of 100 in any given society feel misunderstood in comparison to 100 INTJs, 100 INFPs, and so on. So in other words, the question is really more about which type, given their makeup, is the most likely to experience subjectively the feeling of being misunderstood. Because how do you really measure being not subjectively misunderstood objectively? It's obviously going to be channeled through a subjective experience. I don't really have the answer because I'm not in the hearts of people, I'm not in the minds of people. I can only rely on the reports that I get from people in my community and in other communities. And it seems to me that, INFJs is definitely going to be up there, but so are going to be a lot of, IP types, INTJs as well, but also IP types like ISFPs, INFPs, INTPs, ISTPs. Perhaps again the S is a little bit less likely, but because they tend to be more grounded in the real world, in the earth. But it's still going to be a feeling that is prevalent. So it's not going to be quite possible to give the answer, the final answer, which is the type that is the most misunderstood. What I think is more pertinent in the case of INFJs is actually not so much the feeling of being misunderstood. It exists. I'm not denying it exists, but I'm thinking that a more interesting subjective experience that I've seen noticed is feeling alienated by, well, first of all, alienated in the sense of my book, The Ecstatic Soul, which you're already familiar with. I'm not going to return to it, but also feeling alienated by a disconnect between their prescience, which is a subjective experience, subjective content of their consciousness, their prescience, the feeling that they have a vision, and their inability to actually realize it in the external world, because the external world is a lot more hostile than what would be suggested by the insight of the deep world, of the symbolic archetypes. So it's like you're an INFJ and you're born with an innate tendency to experience yourself as having something to contribute to the world in terms of vision, in terms of, a way forward. But you feel like this longing and this drive cannot be satisfied because you're not given the objective conditions in order to accomplish it. And so you're a little bit lost, and your soul that is wandering over the world, condemned to adapting to a world that does not really conform to your makeup in the way the world is, especially in the West. And you have a strong feeling that if the world was organized slightly differently, then you would have the levers and you have the parameters to activate what your prescience is telling you in the deep world. But this disconnect is alienating and is very strongly felt. Sure, one of the sub-experiences associated with this experience is that of feeling misunderstood. But I think it's more precise to say that there is like a kind of feeling of being off balance, of being like, okay, I have a lot of potential, there's a lot that I want to do, but I don't even know how to begin because the objective world is operating in a language that is not my language. And so I don't know how to articulate my language in such a way that I can impact the objective world. That's the fundamental disconnect. And that's what INFJs experience possibly more than anyone else. Because of NI, but also because of FE, which drives them to want to change the world and change people, more so than with INTJs. So the disconnect is going to be felt by INTJs, it's going to be less acute because INTJs won't feel the call of prescience in the same way. But, that's my point of view. Try to put more of the focus on this disconnect and less on this ultimately rather vague notion of being misunderstood. But let me know what you think in the comments, guys. Really curious regarding your thoughts. And I'll see you tomorrow in this room again But not for much longer. Don't forget my Patreon page, guys. Appreciate the support. Bye-bye.